I realized that the occupation of a child, and you kind of touch on this a little bit, is play. And outdoor play is such a vital occupation for children, and it's really at risk. And so the whole mission of Timbernook is to restore. It's not even a progressive idea what I'm doing. It's just restoring the occupation of outdoor play and protecting that for children, and to really enhance it and make sure it's as authentic as possible, because the more authentic it is, the more therapeutic it is for children.
Welcome to What's the Big Idea? I'm your host, Dan Carney. Today, your co-host, Dan Carney, because I'm joined in the studio by my very special colleague, Kim Dwankowski, an early education specialist. Hi, Kim.
Hello, Dan.
Thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
We just had the opportunity to interview Angela Hanscom, who is a pediatric occupational therapist, best-selling author, and she runs Timbernook. And she's all about outdoor play and getting our kids back out to be balanced and barefoot and in nature. And I thought it was an amazing conversation.
Yeah, I told her I want to come over and play in her backyard now, so.
And as an early education teacher, what did you take out of our interview?
It's like a reinforcement of all the things that I really do think. It's just the things that are hard to put into day-to-day practice. You have to make a real effort to do it.
Yeah, it's a great interview. Angela talks about developing children's bodies, minds, spirits, curiosity, learning. If you're a teacher of any age level, if you're a parent and your kids are any age level, I think you're going to really enjoy hearing Angela's thoughts on why being outside, being less structured, and being less supervised is better for all kids. And with that, here's our interview. It's my great pleasure now to welcome on the podcast Angela Hanscom. Angela is a pediatric occupational therapist, the author of Balanced and Barefoot, How Unrestricted Outdoor Play Makes for Strong, Confident, and Capable Children, and the founder of Timbernook, an organization that started out as an experiment but is now reaching children all around the world. Angela, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So much I want to get to in both your talks and your book and the work you're doing with Timbernook. I did want to start, though, with a quote from your book, Balanced and Barefoot, that I think kind of cuts to the heart of a lot of what you're doing. You wrote, "Unrestricted and unsupervised play is one of the most valuable educational experiences we can offer our children." And yet I feel like that quote runs counter to how many people are doing childhood today in America. How are we restricting children, and why is it damaging their development?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We're restricting them in so many different ways. Physically, we're restricting them. So having them sit for hours at a time is really wreaking havoc on their minds and bodies. So we could jump into that, but they're also being restricted on not enough playtime with other children. And so that's affecting them socially, and just developing relationships with other people, especially now during COVID. It's like more important than ever that they have a connection with other kids, but yeah, even just cognitively as well, because it's through play where you start using higher level thinking skills, problem solving, being mentally flexible with other kids' play ideas. Being able to even just initiate a play idea and execute that is something that we're really not giving them enough opportunity to do. So it's, when we say whole child, it's kind of affecting everything.
Yeah, Kim and I were talking just before we came on the interview here about your discussion about core strength, and something that probably most people wouldn't think of when they think of play and children.
Well, yeah, I was so, it's interesting because I enjoyed reading all your things. I watched your TED Talk too, which is fantastic. But for some reason, all the comments about core strength, I kept kind of obsessively letting the wheels in my brain turn over that one, because it's interesting when you think that one thing that you don't really think much of on a day-to-day basis, especially in children. Like I just think they'll rock and core strength. Like I don't think, a 5-year-old in core strength, that it does sort of have like a butterfly effect across all of the developmental milestone things that we tick off in assessments.
Yeah.
And to think that there's like one kind of foundational thing that we're getting wrong that's affecting so much,
And why is that, Angela? What is the issue with core strength in our children today?
Like we always talk about, it's important for kids to be able to cross midline a lot as therapists, it's a basic coordination skill, I guess. When you start getting into sports, you need to be able to cross that midline, but you can't really do that until you have a midline. And the way that we help with that as a therapist is we work on core strength, and we have them actually spin in circles. So in our clinics, we have swings hanging from the ceiling, but to give them a good sense of where their body is in space, they need to be moving in all different directions. So that piece is really important. And that if kids are being restricted from moving in rapid ways, that can affect everything, because the vestibular sense is the key to all the other senses. So if kids are not moving enough, that sense gets underdeveloped and weak, and it can affect their sense of body awareness and space. They become more and more clumsy and more prone to get hurt. But it can affect like their visual skills, and it affects attention in the classroom. Kids are literally even just falling out of their chairs in school right now, running into each other more often. But it affects emotional regulation too. So like if you get really mad, to be able to naturally bring that back down again. And then activity level. So we keep complaining kids are off the wall. But they need plenty of movement opportunity. So core is important. It supports like the head like the neck muscles and all that, to be able to look, listen. And but yeah, I would say the vestibular sense is what I'm like really concerned for.
And where is that loss coming from, both in their balance and their core?
Yeah. So what's happening is kids are often in an upright position all the time. So I sat in a recent research project for an occupational therapist. She was getting her doctoral degree. And it was like some FAOTA, it's some like additional qualification for an OT that is like higher up. And she did research here in America to see how often kids are in a chair or sitting. And it's an average of 9 hours a day that kids are sitting in a chair. So, if you think about that, if they're most of the time they're upright and they're not, spinning in circles or rolling down the hills or doing all the things we did growing up, and the fluid inside the inner ear can thicken. And they could start to have ear infections. They can start to have an underdeveloped, what we call vestibular sense. That's a balance sense. And what really needs to happen is we want them to spin and go upside down so that fluid can move back and forth so it doesn't thicken. And it stimulates those little hair cells. And that develops your vestibular sense. So kids actually need like at least, like plenty of movement opportunities. So like I recommend at least 3 hours of outdoor play a day in order to not only keep it strong, but maintain it. Or it starts to, get weaker.
Yeah, you said that you want children to move in ways that makes grown-ups gasp, I think is how you said it.
I loved that.
Yeah,
I loved that. I actually work in the preschool here on the playground. So that's sort of one of my mottos is like we always have meetings about like safety and how high should they climb on the structure, and when it comes to me to answer, I'm always like as high as they can, as long as their hands are still on it. Like I want them to climb, and just yesterday at the Christmas party, like one little girl made everyone gasp because she was on the monkey bars, and she gave me a look like she knew that she was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay up, and all I did was to kind of like gently go behind her. And I was like, you got it. And if you don't, just fall. I got you. But like, it's so important for them to make us gasp. I think you could put it beautifully. It's poetic.
And you say 3 hours of outdoor play a day. Why doesn't organized sport count?
Well, some of the organized sports are still kind of upright, right? So like even like soccer and running and you're getting some movement, but you're still upright. So you're not getting them in that anti-gravity position and moving in rapid ways. And so that's one component of why. Plus it's often you're being told what to do at certain times, like it's drills. So it's not spontaneous movement where children really need opportunities to move, allow their neurological systems to, to be stimulated in all different ways, depending on what they need at that time. So a child, for instance, might need to spin and start spinning, and that's because they're craving that sensory input and they're trying to organize those senses. But if we continuously say don't spin, or get down from that rock, that's when we become the barrier to that neurological development. So with sports, it's often like, yeah, don't spin, you're supposed to be in line, we're going to be kicking the ball. Like you're not always given the opportunities to move in those bigger ways. But the other issue is they're not able to, you're not really playing, you're following adult directed activity. So yeah, you're getting some movement, but it's not play is a whole different ball game. Play is when the kids create the rules, the kids are using those higher level problem solving thinking skills and diving deep into a play scheme where they get to like work on emotional control and all those other good stuff that you won't necessarily always get through sports.
Yeah, and it's a good segue into talking a bit more about play and imagination. You've got some beautiful passages in your book about children creating their own societies, their own hierarchies when they play, and this idea that whether you're a teacher or a parent, you see this, that often children play so deeply they get lost in that world. And I'm sure, Kim, you probably see that on a regular basis.
It's really one of my favorite things to see, and I was so interested too in like my second daughter, my middle child, was everything that you described in your book and in your speeches. Like she was deemed delayed in her speech and like delay. And her pediatrician was like, oh, you should probably intervene and, probably do some things. And I was like, give me 6 months. And I started to take her more to the park and everything. But it wasn't until we went to like wilderness park where there was literally nothing there. There was no play structure, no swing set, nothing. And just let her loose there that and with a group. Like I found your little nature play group and like let her loose there, that it was everything you said. Like the kids would just sort of come up with everything because there was nothing there, and then from nothing was like an entire world that they would even revisit the next week. Like they would pick it up again. And it was interesting that once I took away even park and just left her with nature, no delays.
Yeah.
And it was in the 6 month crunch time. Yeah.
That's great.
And you write about that, Angela, the difference between nature stimuli and man-made stimuli. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So when you step outdoors, like multiple senses are being stimulated, right? So if you think about like being in, like I'm in this room right now, there's like no wind, there's only so far I can see with my eyes because there's a wall right there. There's no bird sounds. The ground's even, like I don't even have to think about it. It's not challenging me that much to walk across the room. But if I step outdoors, the ground's uneven, so it's constantly challenging my balance, my senses. There's wind, it might be cold outside, so I'm regulating to that sense, and making new connections in my brain about that. Depth perception. There's bird sounds. So there's multiple synapses firing, and so your chances for what we call sensory integration to happen, which is organization of those senses, is going to be higher outside in an environment with multiple senses. But it's also, in order for a child to have an organized brain, like the ideal state to be in is to be an alert but calm state of mind. So again, you look outside and you see like greens and browns and blues, and we'll paint our preschools those colors because we're trying to calm them down. You go for a massage and you'll hear crashing waves to calm to calm you. Even certain smells of trees are calming. So it's very calming stimuli out there. But you're alert, right? Because the ground's uneven. An animal might run by. You're constantly assessing your environment. So that happens to be the ideal state for that sensory integration. So we want to think about what percentage of time are children in an environment conducive to that organization of the brain, and then what percentage of time do we have children in an environment that might be disorganizing or dysregulating, where maybe they're really close to other children. And so that's a factor. Like, often outside you can really spread out. The kids have a lot of space. Inside, they start getting really close, they bumping into each other. There's a lot of transitions inside, right? So we're constantly changing direction for them. And that a lot of kids with sensory issues that can be very disruptive. Lots of visual posters on the walls, noises are louder inside. So a lot of times the environments indoors can not be conducive to that organization.
And it can actually make it harder for those students that have those issues. It amplifies that. You have that great line in your book. You say, indoors, there are rules to follow. I love that. It's very poignant. And often on playgrounds there are too. And part of that's because there are adults around. Why is being unsupervised awesome for kids?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to, obviously being able to like follow rules and being respectful and all stuff, that's really important. But I feel like children also need an opportunity to play away from adults in the adult world and all the expectations from that. So because they need an opportunity to be able to play with other children and come up with their own play ideas and execute that and just dive deep into play. And often what we learned over the years is at Timbernook, if we were, let's say you guys were building a fort, if I was standing right next to you, you would often, what we found is the kids would start turning to the adult to seek constant reassurance. Like, is this okay? Are we doing, are we doing this right? Can you do this for us? And tattling on each other more often. And then we realized if we backed up like at least like 20 feet and then got down low, so we reduced adult presence out there, that we could still supervise them for safety. But they would start turning to each other to come up with their own ideas, solve their own problems, and even like deal with their own conflicts, and feel capable. Like we did that. We solved our own problem.
I feel like I struggle with that notion on my playground at work because I kind of describe it as a dance that I don't always do well, but I really intend to, where the stepping forward and the stepping back, like knowing when to come in and change something or interrupt something, or for safety's sake stop something, and then when to just sort of fade into the background. But I think the fading is where a lot of times all the magic happens, like for me to witness, but then also for them to get all the educational values that they're getting out of something. And I think it's so interesting that you're saying, the whole idea of unsupervised, but there's still supervision for safety play, is that, like, especially at my level of teaching, like preschool age, is we're always trying to teach agency and like being responsible for yourself and for other people in your space, and using your voice and not your fists to solve your conflicts. That agency is something that we want them to leave the preschool with a good sense of, so that they can go into the grade levels and succeed. But where do they get that if someone's always watching them like a vulture? And where do they get that if they're the kids that are building a fort and always going like, am I doing it okay? Should I get this? What do I do with this block? That they need to know that we trust them. And I think a lot of that is gained through this kind of play, the unsupervised, you got this, you know what you're doing kind of play.
Right. Yeah.
Angela, why do you think society has increasingly moved away from that? A lot of what you've written and talked about is sort of a comparison to maybe when we were kids, and you look at comparing data to the 1980s, increased fidgeting, decreased vestibular. What has changed in society that has caused this?
The biggest thing is fear. It's like something we can't see, but it's all surrounds fear. So it's fear of kids getting hurt, liability, right? Fear of what like the adults often were saying fear of what other people think of them. Like, if are they a bad parent if they're not going in, if or a teacher, um, fear of insects. Like here in New Hampshire, we have ticks, so people are afraid to go in the woods. Fear of stranger danger. So it all most of the reasons why kids are not getting the time is fear. The other one is being overly scheduled, where we're trying to like enhance our children, I guess, by doing so many things. And but that's just creating all sorts of issues because they're constantly being transitioned from one place to the next. They don't have that solitude, that downtime away from the fears of the world. They don't have time to. I had recently had a middle school child tell me, I was helping to volunteer at my children's school and doing a health class. And one of my homework assignments was to take one day away from screens. They had 2 weeks to do this. I said, just pick one day away from screens. And you would have thought it was taking their life away. But one girl was like, I'm afraid to be alone with my thoughts, was what she said. And I was like, oh my gosh, isn't that interesting that they're so stimulated and constantly entertained that they don't have that downtime.
That speaks to me in so many levels as a
Gave
teacher.
me goosebumps.
Yeah, it's children they're never bored. Boredom is a good thing,
Yeah.
right? We say this to our kids all the time at home. Like it's when you're bored is now your time to take over and decide and grow. And our kids don't always love hearing that, but it's good for them.
Totally. And I always see, I'm such a devotee to play because I've never stopped playing, and I'm, knocking on the door of middle age. But for me, it's like an essential thing, like sleeping. And scientists always say, like, well, sleeping is when you order your thoughts of the day and everything that happened, and you're regulating and all the important things. But when I'm like messing around with stuff and playing around, that's where I'm like aware that I'm actually sorting and processing. And like that second daughter that I told you about, that play is like so essential to her. Sometimes her teachers will be like, what happened like with that situation in class, or what does she think about this? And I'm always like, give me a couple days, I'll see what happens after she plays it through, because I will see it in her dramatic play. Especially whatever she's thinking about, something big that happened to her comes out when she's got her superhero dolls, and then I'll know.
That's like play therapy, right? So it's like that's how you work through what's going on in your world. I love that. That's great.
You have in the book, you have this anecdote about a girl named Sarah, a 9-year-old who is overscheduled, and it reminds me of so many students I've encountered in my teaching, that they're almost like walking, talking resumes. It's just like they move from one bullet point to the next in life. And we've done surveys here at school and found out just how many extracurriculars our students are doing, and it's really a little alarming. A couple times now you've mentioned Timbernook. Now would be a good time to hear about that, which you founded. Could you give us a little overview of what Timbernook does and how you started it?
Yeah. So it started in my backyard. It was never planned. I just said, it's a pretty long story, but yeah, it started in my backyard as an experiment pretty much. And I was just doing it for my own children. And the first year I took university OT students to help me, because that's my background. And I thought, what a unique way to have these students see nature for its therapeutic value. But I had no idea what I was getting into, because traditionally occupational therapists work one-on-one with a child or a small group of kids. So I was not used to running a bigger group of children. And I didn't realize I was starting a business. I just was going to do this for fun. And I ran that first summer with 3 weeks of summer camp. And then I was like, I'm all done. That was so much work. It was a lot of work to manage that many children and everything, but there was a huge demand. And so I paid attention to that, because I had 4 volunteers from the university go back, and I had 14 volunteers for the next year. And I had a couple teachers reach out, and so I kept saying yes. And each year I'd be like, I'm going to do it one more year. And the first year was all about entertaining them and keeping them like doing fun projects outside. And what I realized is the kids just wanted to play. And so what I've learned over the years is, really reflecting back is I'm not a teacher or an environmentalist or a naturalist. And really at the time, those were or still are primarily the professions that do nature programming. And I kept thinking, what does an occupational therapist have anything to do with nature programs? And I realized that the occupation of a child, and you kind of touch on this a little bit, is play. And outdoor play is such a vital occupation for children, and it's really at risk. And so the whole mission of Timbernook is to restore. It's not even a progressive idea what I'm doing. It's just restoring the occupation of outdoor play and protecting that for children, and to really enhance it and make sure it's as authentic as possible, because the more authentic it is, the more therapeutic it is for children. And so that's pretty much what we do. We're in 4 countries now, and we basically provide the opportunity to play in very rich um, play experiences, I guess, for lack of a better word. But the environment is staged in different ways, and the children play for like hours out there with different materials.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what is if there is a typical day at Timbernook, what does it look like?
So an example day might be, little kids, ages 4 to 7. So we always have mixed ages out there because it's more representative of true neighborhood play. They're not all the same age kind of thing. So we might have, 4 to 7-year-olds come out, and they might have a puppet show of 3 little pigs. And then there would be real bales of hay out there, real bricks, big logs, and then there might be wolf masks and wolf tails hanging up, and some other items. There might be rope and some like milk crates staged out there. And so after the puppet show, we would give them an open opportunity. So we'd say, now you have the opportunity to create your own 3 little pig homes. And that's really it. So whether they do it or not is up to them, but it creates a foundation and inspiration for play for some of those kids that don't have a lot of experience playing. They need a bridge. Sometimes it's too overwhelming to have a blank slate and they have no idea what to do. So it gives a launching point, and then the other children play in those materials in creative ways, and it inspires those kids to play in new ways. And so the environment is staged in a way that inspires kids. And the more they do Timbernook, the more different play opportunities they get, the more creative they get. But they have usually about at least 3 hours out there.
I want to play that. I want to play that. I love the idea too of like it kind of goes with what you were saying about unstructured play, but there's like the safety structure, or unsupervised, sorry, but there's the supervision structure. But the whole idea of like free 3-hour play in the wilderness, there's still like a skeletal something there, should there need to be a skeletal something there. You're just not sending kids out into the world wild and being like, go, here's a rock. Yeah. But it's also nice, like, I just love the idea too of stories as like the backbones for things, because I think a lot of times our play with kids, especially that age from 4 to 7, like the whole notion of how many ways can you tell a story, and like living it, being able to go and manipulate the materials and be a character in the storybook, or be the force of nature that makes a house fall. Like there's so many ways to sort of fit yourself in, that I think even the kids that do go out and are more like orbiters and don't want to be in the middle of a hay bin throwing a brick, like there's still a space for everyone, which is really what nature is. There is a space for everyone. It doesn't matter what, even if on a given day you are the kid with the brick in hand leading everyone with the wolf mask on, there might be a day where you're not. And nature always has you. Like there's still a space.
Yeah. Like another example for older kids. So we might have 7 to 14-year-olds out there, and then they would have like an opportunity to create like a giant ball run, but there would be just gutters and black tubing and different size balls and duct tape and rope. And again, it's an open invitation, and whether they do it or not, it's up to them. So you'll find most of the kids will engage in it in some form or fashion, and they might lug things up on giant rocks or yeah. So, but it's working on a lot. Like you see your leaders come forward, they're doing everything from fine motor, tying knots to, problem solving, creativity. But it's all done through play, and meaningful play. So it's a choice. That's another thing, is it has to be a choice because true play is a choice. So
I'm curious what kind of children and families come to Timber Nook. What kind of kids are they? What are the parents' expectations? Why are they there?
that's a good question. So it's very how do I explain it? We try to replicate true neighborhood play as much as possible. So in real world. So it would be a mixture of children, really. It would be children that would be considered neurotypical to children that might have some challenges. But the beauty of that is that we don't create programming just based on, like, for instance, what might be typical in my world is to have a camp for kids with special needs. And if I took all the kids that, let's say, struggled with social skills and put them in a camp, often you're going to need an adult to interact more. And it's not real world to me. I feel like it's better to have children that have all different strengths. And that child that has trouble with social skills will have that peer modeling. They'll have kids with more creativity model for them in a natural way. And so we'll often see kids with special needs there. We see them as they have great transformation stories because they're placed in a real world environment. It's so yeah, for instance, we have like some children with some more severe disabilities out there, but we're seeing beautiful things with them because the kids like just take them under their wing. And I see like speech therapy happening out there. Like, I see OT, I see like physical therapy, I see, all sorts of really cool stuff. But again, it's through a natural play environment.
That's really cool. And can you give us an example of a success story that stands out to you?
Yeah, so there's so many, but I'll give it just a basic example. We had a little boy come one time. So we have these giant mud puddles here too at our site. I mean, every location for Timbrex all different, obviously. But at ours, we have woods, and then we have a river, and then we have giant, giant mud puddles. And this little boy came knowing we were going to our mud puddles, and he's like, I'll go, but I'm not taking my boots off because he had plastic woolly boots. Eh, and he didn't want to get dirty. And I'm like, that's fine. So we go down, and there was frogs in the mud puddles. And so some of the kids went in and started catching frogs. And he was like, like he was on the edge of the mud puddle and he was getting super excited. So he went right in, and the water went in his welly boots, and he had socks on. So that felt really gross. So came right back out and said, can I take this off? My socks are wet. This feels gross. So I said, sure. So he took his socks and shoes off and went in barefoot, and was because the motivation to catch the frogs. And then afterwards, I told his mom, he was like went in barefoot catching frogs, and she's like, oh my gosh. She goes, do you know we've been trying to get him to go barefoot for 2 years in a clinic setting, in a therapy setting, unsuccessful, where they use the plastic balance beams. And so I found that interesting because if I had said, I think you should try to take your shoes off, what do you think he would have done?
Yeah. Wow. It was organic,
Yeah.
natural.
And it goes to that agency part where he made the decision to do it. He didn't like how it felt. He decided, what can I do about this? I can take him off. And then it was that there's so much victory in that victory that's like a Russian doll of victory. Like the shoes came off, but there was so much that anchored it, that was just choice and taking care of himself and standing up for his discomfort and fixing it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And it was a real environment too. So now he was able to generalize that over to start going barefoot camping. Like here we are in a clinic setting, putting them on plastic balance beams with little pickies. And like, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll go barefoot outdoors. Like it's a totally different, it's not even a real environment. So, and that motivation to play was what trumped his fear. But yeah, your choice was big. So if I had said, no, I think you should try to take your shoes off. Often when kids have sensory issues, it can rise anxiety to even suggest they take their shoes off to them and become a control issue.
For teachers listening, parents listening, what recommendations, what tips can you give them for if they're feeling like their child's anxious, their child maybe is overscheduled, is out of touch with nature? Where can a parent or a teacher start, or school start?
Sure. Well, I definitely recommend reading Balanced and Barefoot if they can, just because it gives basics for both the parents and also for schools. And some basic tips are, if I was a parent, one thing I recommend is probably inviting like another child or a couple of kids over to play with your child, even if it's for, like there's so many like play dates right now where kids are like scheduled for 1 hour, but I mean like having a child come over for the complete day and allowing them to have plenty of time to play. And especially outdoors, I think sometimes when there's other children involved, they inspire each other. It's a little bit harder to get kids to play by themselves, so I feel like that's one of the first things I would do. The second thing is consider putting some items outside that might be unique, that they might be interested in playing with. For instance, a lot of kids like fort building. It's almost one of the first things they always do at Timbernook is create their sense of space out there. So old curtains, lumber, tools, tires, but like having stuff that they're allowed to create forts with outside is really big. For little children, sometimes old kitchenware is really fun in the dirt, in the sand on the beach, trucks and ramps. So starting to think outside the box a little bit with, materials that can be used for many purposes outdoors.
I love all of that. I love all that. And Kim, I know you have some thoughts on that.
Oh, that's my playground at this school is beautiful, and it has beautiful structures and every STEAM toy that you could ever want. But my contribution to it, since I've been here, I started a mud kitchen, and it's all just old kitchen things because they don't want the toy ones. They want like the actual kitchen gadgets, and so they're in there. And then since my kids are smaller and the space is limited, like I add unconventional sort of tiny world things where it's just sort of like a pile, like loose part type pile of like paper rolls or, weird recycled bits that I thought, well, this could do something besides just be recycled, and to see what they make with that. And it's always, like even if they fall down eventually, like it's always something fun.
And you've written and spoken also, Angela, about the need to bring back longer recess. That schools have reduced recess. And why is that longer recess important? Not just because they have more time, but actually developmentally, why is it better for them?
Well, because often like the short 20-minute recess sessions, it is not enough time to get into play. So, well, two reasons for that. One is they can't dive into a play scheme, right? So you figure out, who am I going to play with? What am I going to play? And then the bell rings. And kids are smart, so they'll resort to, playing games like structured games like tag, or playing on and off a play structure. But they will be less likely to dive into imaginatory type play, which is a higher level of play, and that's going to be working on social emotional skills and higher level thinking. The other issue with that is, when kids are feeling fidgety, they've been sitting for most of the day. When you first let them out, their activity level goes up here. So now they're already like, their arousal level is already here, and now they're up here in 20 minutes. So you let them back in and they're off the wall. That's why those 5-minute breaks too, it can totally dysregulate kids. So they're really off the wall. So it takes a good 45 minutes to an hour for them to regulate back down again, to be ready to pay attention and learn. So you want longer recess to help them prepare for learning again, but also so they can dive into some advanced play schemes.
And I think it probably would require a whole other episode of the podcast to talk about screen time. but maybe we just touch on it a little bit, where screens are now everywhere, in the backs of car seats and in every child's hand. And then you talk about seeing kids swiping at toys, trying to like wake the toy up or engage it. Just I don't want to we could launch a whole other episode on this one, but what are some things you've noticed and how screens are taking away from children's development?
I think the biggest thing that keeps popping up to me is it's not reality. And so I feel like children need real experiences in person with other children, for connection and mental health reasons, but they also need real experiences to develop their neurological systems, right? So they need the senses to be engaged. They need to go upside down, and like all those things will not happen when you're sitting upright and you're not even engaging the muscles and the senses. You're not going to develop your senses properly. um, so
Oh my goodness, I want to play with you in your backyard. Those are my final thoughts. Like I'm going to get on a plane right now. I love, like I always kind of take like a morsel to sort of store in my brain and keep forever. And I think I love that you started Timber Nook because you played, and it was just sort of like an experiment. It was an act of play that started all of this. And that to me is like a little beautiful nugget. I just like the symmetry and the balance of that. And that it just, you were like, well, no, I'm done playing, but you're never done. I think it's really cool. And I love what you're doing. I think, especially at a school like where Dan and I are, and the kids do have screens, they have everything. That just getting back to like dirt, there's really a lot of value in it. And I think the kids, even if they have everything, like you put a pile of iPads and you're in some sort of enchanted meadow and you have a pile of like kitchen gadgets, they really are going to go for the kitchen gadgets. Like most of them are going to take the pile of nothing and make something out of it. They really are.
Cool. Angela, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate all your insights. Really enjoyed the book. And as Kim said, love what you're doing at Timber Nook.
thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I'm coming over Sunday.
Okay. Awesome.
A huge thanks to Angela Hanscom and my colleague Kim Dwankowski for joining me. Love that interview. Love everything Angela's doing, especially here in 2021, this stressful, largely indoor year. We can always get outside. In fact, getting outside is one of the things we can always do. And if you're a parent or a teacher, hopefully you took something away from Angela's words. I strongly encourage you to check out her book, Balanced and Barefoot, to read more of her thoughts. And you can go over to Timber Nook's website and learn more about the programs she's doing there. And I've linked a bunch of resources about Angela and her work in the show notes. Well, I wish you a very happy, merry end of 2021 and a new year and a healthy new year. Thanks so much for checking out What's the Big Idea. I appreciate you for listening. And as always, share any thoughts or comments on Twitter at BigIdeaEd. Take care, everyone.